Good morning. It's another Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Today, my guest is Denisha Merriwether, who is the Director of Family Engagement with the American Federation of Children. She's also the founder of a campaign called Black Minds Matter, of which there are several national, many national representatives who in their local areas are great advocates for children, specifically for Black children, and specifically for choice, for families to have options of where they send kids to school, maybe no school at all, maybe even homeschool or unschooling, a
Yep.
variety of opportunities for young people. Denisha, good morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Just so elated.
Well, I'm happy to have you. Anytime I can get somebody on who has already lived the thing that they're working on, meaning you are working on fighting for new opportunities for young people, you are working on choice and as a core issue, and you yourself have lived that choice. You were somebody who received a Florida scholarship to attend a school of your choosing, and it worked out for you. This is what I love about that, Denisha, that story, is so many people have a good experience or a lucky break in life, and then they grow up and become educated, and then they're against the thing that helped them succeed, right? We have many people in our community. When you talk about Black Minds Matter, there's many people with a Black mind that was improved by private schooling who are against private schooling for others. Does that ever get on your nerves? Do you ever, do you ever just want to scream about that?
Yeah, and that's really, why the initiative was, created. I benefited, like you said, from school choice in Florida, got a scholarship, and it became really necessary for me to give back in this way when I thought about and when I saw students in my own community who didn't have that same break. They were still relegated to failing schools in Jacksonville, Florida. And I saw the impact that it made in my family when I became the first in my family to graduate from high school. And my family has had a history of dropping out of school, going to jail, and being involved in vice. And so when I saw that it made a difference in my life, I wanted to give back. So that was why I've been thrust into this space of education reform. And then after the protests as a result of the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor over the summer, I coined an op-ed called Black Minds Matter to say exactly what you were just saying, Chris. Those people who are saying that, yes, we need to make sure that Black lives are not dying in the street. And those same people who say that, okay, well, it's okay to murder the minds of Black students every day in classrooms across this country. And that's so not right. It's hypocritical. And it really, speaks to a larger issue of, we need to make sure that our essence and our being have life. And that's the motto of Black Minds Matter.
I see this piece that you did in Real Clear Education, getting them mixed up. And it's called Black Minds Matter. The nation last year, this was in the summer of 2020. Of course, we were all gripped in the systemic inequalities that led to the death of George Floyd. What was your main kind of push and inspiration? Where were you in your mind when you wrote this? What was the thing that you were thinking about?
Yeah, it was definitely, how can we not only say that Black lives matter, but we also have to think about, before things happen, before people are killed by police officers, and also students are dying in schools. When you have students graduating with a 0.03 GPA and there's 65 in their class, when students are going to school buildings with no electricity and no water, there's a problem. And it seems like as a society, like us and who work in this space, we feel that anger and that frustration all the time because we see it. But the general public, it's they recognize that it's a problem, but not necessarily, angry and frustrated and breaking down buildings and setting fires to say like, hey, our kids are dying every day in classrooms. And I saw that personal impact in my life when teachers were telling me that I wasn't enough, when I saw teachers was sighing when I came through the door, and students in, my brothers and sisters, my, family members who dropped out of school for those same reasons where nobody really cared. And so we have this parallel between the racist foundation of the policing system in America, and similarly the racist foundation of the education system. And we've become, aware of the injustices in the criminal justice system. And so Black Minds Matter, that piece was like, there are injustices in the education system as well. And I don't think that we have to focus on one at a time. We can focus on both at the same time.
Yeah, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, often we are talking about the after effects of the school system. We're talking about what happens to you after you leave school: police brutality, police violence, things that are going on in the justice system as you become an adult. But I like your take on it, that for 12 years before that, you are in an unequal system. You are in a system that anyone can look at it and say, yeah, this system's unequal, right? Like what kids are getting in more resourced areas versus the education deserts, places where education has kind of dried up over years for different reasons.
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of resistance to your message? I mean, I see your campaign is pretty positive. It seems like a very positive thing. Do you get pushback?
I've actually, I don't like the trolls, and I got some very good advice during, so after the op-ed published, I started doing a video series and podcast, and you were on with Walter Blanks and Tanisha Peoples. And actually during that episode with Tanisha and some of the women who work in this movement, Naomi Shelton, and, somebody typed in like, why are you, all minds matter, and why are you talking about this? And it was, and I put it on the screen, and, it was a very offensive comment. I put it on the screen and said, hey, look what this person said. And, this is a new movement. And I tell everybody all the time that I'm not, with this project, all ideas are welcome, and I'm willing to shape it and mold it however the public sees fit, because that's how things happen and change. And, the wonderful ladies, which I got a lot of mentorship and guidance, said, no, take that down. We're not going to let them steal our moment, steal our joy. We're not even going to focus on that. So that's been my mindset when I see the trolls and I hear things. But I've definitely gotten comments and some, backlash, but I don't like to give attention to it, because it definitely does put me in a different mind space than the positive work and the effort that I'm really trying to achieve with Black Minds Matter. And so with own schools directory, which can be found on the website blackmindsmatter.net, highlighting schools founded by Black people, which is something that is, like you said, positive and uplifting, and giving these school founders a place to share best practices, and to give the general public an opportunity to see like, hey, yes, there are Black owned schools out here, and they're doing the work, they're boots on the ground. They might not, have the best websites, but they're boots on the ground, and they're doing, great work for our students. And that's also in the wave of, highlighting Black owned businesses, highlighting Black owned bookstores, Black owned coffee shops, all this stuff. And it's like, they're Black owned schools, and most of these schools have remained operable because of school choice, because there are policies in place in order for funds to come to schools, and so to these Black owned and founded schools. And so when you have the NAACP and all these national organizations who are funneling money into political campaigns that destroy Black minds and say that school choice doesn't matter, you say, well, here are Black owned schools that are operable because of these programs. And again, your constituents, the people who are voting you in. And so, yes, we want to educate the general public and let them know, hey, yeah, these people don't support you. But at the same time, put pressure on the political masses, the more we have this information out there, the harder it's going to be to refute it. You're on mute. You're on mute.
She's pushing you on mute. You on mute. I was just like looking at this. I was like thinking, this is devastating. This is on your site that you have, your blackmindsmatter.net. If anybody wants to go to the site, and if you click on the About tab, it talks about the mission that you guys have. Yeah. But only 15 out of 100 Black students nationwide are proficient in reading.
Yep.
As a very first sentence just is jarring. It just blows you away. 15 out of 100 Black students nationwide are proficient in reading. Yep. That should end all debate.
Yeah.
That should just be the end of the story right there. Nothing that comes after that should be an argument for the system remaining the way that it is right now. Because we just know that like reading is so important to everything else. So if I really wanted to harm a people, I would just stop you from being able to read. That would be the easiest way to just target a people and get rid of them, is to basically say, let's make sure that they don't become illiterate.
That's right. And 13 proficient in math, so you have 15 in reading, but in the national NAEP score, 13 are only proficient in math. And so you have these large pools of students who are not graduating knowing basic skills, wow. and math and reading, that's something we all need, but that's not even, all the other subjects, and so it's really sad when you think about, and that stat that you pulled up, 70% of students who don't graduate from high school, who drop out, male students, are entering into the criminal justice system. And, we all talk about the school to prison pipeline. It's something we all talk about because it keeps showing up in data sets. And it's sad because we've coined a term because it keeps showing up so much in data sets, and we've just, the school to prison pipeline. And that the school part is first, it started in school. And so we kind of have to really, they're linked, the criminal justice system and the education system are linked. And, it's pretty sad. And I on your platform, which I'm very honored to be here on your platform, Denisha Peoples on her, episode, she was just talking about that, how it's a modern day chattel slavery. And that's so true. It's so true.
I mean, if you can make sure that you de-skill a people, make sure that they never acquire the skills that they need to be prosperous, especially in a country that is built on capitalism, like if you can't play in the game, of course, we know what's going to happen to you. When you say that 70%, though, become engaged in the criminal justice system, too, that's another just jarring statistic that should move us to action. It should move us to want to change things. And I think we get out-argued by people who are fierce defenders of the system staying the way that it is, keeping kids in the schools that they are. What are some of the engagement? I mean, you've had to testify on behalf of policy. You've had to engage with the lawmakers who maybe some don't agree with you on these issues. That's an understatement. I see you laughing. It's an understatement, right? Because it's probably more than they just don't agree with you. Well, tell me a little bit about that. What's it like to know that you're walking in to testify before people who have power to make change, and you know for a fact that they don't agree with you? What's been your experience with coming there and telling your story and wanting to have a say?
Yeah, well, I'm always like probably too much of an optimist and probably too much of positive person. And so walking in, I'm always like, oh, this is going to be great. Everything is just going to be peachy. I would say the most jarring moment, I testified before the U.S. Congress Education Committee, and Marcia Fudge, I never forget her name. And I, shared my story, shared about my experience benefiting from education freedom in Florida and how it changed my life and how I've seen the impact of it. And my, just making the speech, telling about my personal experience. And in her remarks, you know, she started off by saying, you know, you're right. You know, your life was changed. And thank you so much for being here. And turn like night and day, but this is not going to be something we're going to pass and basically see that every other Black student gets. And she was African American, and she was a Democrat, and which is just bizarre to me, how partisan politics play so much in this fight. But yeah, and so I've definitely had my share of partisan politics, and it just, you know, it gives me more passion and more purpose to do this work, because if one person can close the door on children, you know, it's beyond, you know, I can't really comprehend it. So it keeps me driven.
I mean, thinking about it though, it's gotta feel like a big betrayal.
Yeah.
Like it's gotta feel like, I mean, you're talking about somebody who, number one, hears your story and says, well, yeah, it sounds like it worked out real well for you. It sounds like a good thing to do. Number two, they're somebody who you're supposed to have like a familial connection with, because, you know, as Black folks, we're supposed to be using all of our power to lift up each other. And then three, it's a Democrat. You know, it's a person who is from a political party who says that they're for the underserved, they're for the little guy, they're for the people who are getting lost in systems.
Yeah.
And then then her, which would be a lot of their responses, it's not just Marsha Fudge, it would be a lot of their responses would be to say to you, yeah, but we're not doing this for everybody else. Sounds good. What's become your analysis of that? Like, what do you tell yourself about that type of betrayal? I mean, I know you're positive, and you, I know that you want to think that, you know, it's all great and it's all good or whatnot. Yeah. But you have to have some sort of political analysis about why they're resisting you.
Yeah, I mean, they're in deep with the teachers unions. I mean, that's the, you know, that's the reason behind it. You know, they're in deep pockets with the teachers unions, who are funding their campaigns and who are giving them buttloads of money to stick to talking points. And that is literally all that they stick to, talking points. You know, we are a bit creative in the education reform space. There are new statistics, new studies, and everything new coming out, and we incorporate those. We look at AP scores coming out of Florida and say, like, hey, what is this attributed to? You know, we're constantly reevaluating the system of education and trying to see what are these trends. But, you know, the people who are deep seated with the teachers unions, they just stick with the same talking points. And there is also, I found this morning, the National School Boards Association, you know, analyzed the NAEP back in May. And at the end of the analysts, you know, analyzing all these trends in the NAEP and in the report, The Condition of Education in America, said, you know, we looked at the NAEP and we tried to find, actually, I'm just going to pull it up so that I can read it verbatim, because I don't want to, they said it so well and I don't want to do them distress. It said, millions of Black parents expect public schools to help their children to be better. Millions of Black parents depend on public education to pursue their happiness. We tried hard to find significant improvement for Black students in the Condition of Education 2020, yet the data demonstrated is disappointing and discouraging. And this is directly from the National School Boards Association. And so I think that, you know, as much as people, they're you know, deep seated with the teachers union, it, you know, the more and more things like Black Minds Matter, things like your platform, you know, you have an enterprise that constantly talks about all of these issues. The more and more, you know, we continue to talk about it all across, you know, regardless of what we think is the best type of option for kids, the more and more the public is going to see. And that's the hope, you know, that's the hope.
Yeah, I mean, you always sound so hopeful and so positive, which I think is like one of your biggest strengths on these issues. It gets, I think, so nasty and so ugly. You've mentioned trolls, you've mentioned pushback, you've mentioned now political people who really should be doing the best that they possibly can for the people that elect them. But really, once you have signed on with the teachers union as as agenda friends, meaning like your lifelong agenda friend. Anything that they are against, they have a big threat on you, right? It becomes very threatening, right? So if you say, you know, we want to open up a very small scholarship program somewhere specifically for the inner city kids of, say, Cincinnati or somewhere,
Yeah.
teachers union of that state will say to you, how long do you want to be an elected official, right? Because all the, you know, all the support that they gave you before then will disappear and evaporate. Do you have any thoughts or ideas about how we get more people involved who are affected? So families, mothers, children, students, others, anybody in the communities who should be represented, who aren't represented. Do you have thoughts about how we get more of them in the game and get them understanding what the issues are?
Yeah. And, you know, I really hope that Black Minds Matter can be a part of that change making process and give families a soft landing zone of, you know, they're new to the education space. And even you mentioned parents and students, but, you know, when I did a Black owned and founded school tour during Black History Month of some of the schools in the Black owned schools directory, and they all of them didn't really know about the larger political landscape of education freedom and the benefits that I would say they kind of take advantage of with being a, you know, private charter virtual Montessori school in choice states. And so of course you had the some of the charter school providers. I'm not interested in being a private school. I wanted to provide. And so, you know, you even have some of these dynamics within the choice space. And so for me with Black Minds Matter, this is an opportunity, regardless of what type of education provider or service it is, you know, all choice is amazing. And all families, Black families specifically, but all families need choice and need to be able to pick whichever school that, you know, they can take advantage of. And so with Black Minds Matter, you know, it's time out, you know, picking between charter and private and voucher and tax credit or ESA and all of these different choice options. And so when we, with Black Minds Matter, expand that and just highlight the stories of parents, students, educators, and then educate them on the political landscape, I think we're able to move the ball forward a little bit more because they're all taking advantage of it in some way. I'm here in Florida, which we have the widest scope of school choice in the country. I would say, you know, we have the tax credit, the ESA, the charter, the private, you know, we have all of these different types of choice options, and parents are, you know, taking advantage of them and, you know, kind of taking them for granted. They're able to pick between whatever public school they want to go to with open enrollment. And so now they need to be educated on the political landscape. Like, hey, this is you're a beneficiary of this, and it's not just something that has happened haphazardly. There are things that need to take place, policies that need to continue to be supported and passed to keep all of these programs operable.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you don't have a problem, it, you know, in some ways makes you a little bit more or less likely to show up for others who have that problem, right? Florida has a lot of school choice. I will say, Denisha, so as you and I both, we share this agenda. We think that this is the right thing to do for our friends and families and for people, is just to have options, to never be stuck, be stuck in some place where you know for a fact that it's not leading to college and jobs and home ownership and a firm seat in the American economic mainstream, right? We just know for a fact that some people are on the fast track to having that permanent seat in the mainstream, and other people, they will be happy. They will be lucky if they get a seat working for the people who have a firm seat in the mainstream. Yeah. But then when you come along and you say, we're going to bust this up, we're going to open up new opportunities for these kids who have not had opportunities forever. This is a historic long-term problem, and we're going to fight it, and we're going to break it up. We're going to open up opportunity for every kid. It's amazing to me the type of haters that come out of that who believe that the system that is trapping these kids is good the way that it is, right? They don't want to know anything else about, change. They don't want to know what the test scores are. They don't want to know what the evidence is that it's an unfair system. They don't want you saying, well, listen, if you've been in a chronically underperforming school that's been in your neighborhood forever and is like a sore spot for that community, you should have options to go to a Christian school or to another district, or to, just options, right?
Yeah.
I never understand the haterade, though. I really don't. I know you touched on it just a little bit, but out of Florida, this is why I bring it up. I've engaged with a lot of people in Florida who constantly attack anything that I put up about Florida, anything about their choice system. What's that?
I said, is it the Orlando Sentinel?
It could be Orlando Sentinel, but it also could be non-institutional sources. It could be just like people who have dedicated their lives to, number one, being anti-choice.
Yeah.
Like, for one. So you bring up anything about, Christian schools, and they say, well, those schools get away with murder. They're allowed to do just about anything that they want. And they teach kids that Jesus rode a dinosaur, and you're kind of like sitting there like, okay, number one, I don't know if that's true. And if there's a school out there teaching kids that Jesus rode a dinosaur or whatnot, please stop. But what I will say is, you're not going to get away with pretending that the mainline school system isn't teaching kids some pretty crazy and foul things, like how not to be literate, right? Yeah. So I don't know what we do beyond politics, beyond passing laws. We also have to win the public over and overcome the really weird objections of people in the public. You have any thoughts around like our message and our messaging, and maybe where we get it right or where we get it wrong?
Yeah. Well, one of the beautiful things about, I'm here talking about Black Minds Matter, is pretty snazzy. People can't look at that title and say like, oh, that's a pretty, provocative. We have Black Lives Matter. We have Black Minds Matter. We have Black Hair Matter. We just, we can just vary they however we want. And so I think, it's probably not as exciting as, you might feel, but I feel like the more you say things like Black Minds Matter, that starts the conversation. Like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about mental health? Are we talking about education? Those are really awesome conversations to start having. We have swag, we have masks that say Black Minds Matter. And when people see that out in the public, I've gotten so many positive responses of people saying that's dope, like that's awesome. Now, they might not know what they're buying into when they're rocking the Black Minds Matter. They might not know that they're saying that Black students deserve education freedom, that parents should be able to use their tax dollars to go to whatever school they want their kids to go to. But they're getting the message out there that says that, hey, Black Minds Matter, and we need to have a deeper conversation of what this means. And so that's a small step of activism, but it really is a form of activism. That's why brands always have, their, logos and everything all over everywhere. And so that's a marketing communications thing that we can do that's outside of the policy space, outside of, the knocking on door knocking and, creating super advocates. We're, telling people like, hey, our Black Minds Matter. And I've gotten so many positive responses, and I'm seeing, every time I look on social media, go hashtag Black Minds Matter, I'm seeing our mask out there in the public, of people rocking it, and people asking for it, people wanting more. And so it's like, this is going to go someplace. People are going to start talking about educate. I just know it. Like, and I don't think it's a matter of like, oh, I am pretty positive, but I do feel like this is going to be remarkable. And it's not just something that's built on itself. It's built on platforms such as yours. Like, you've been knocking this door constantly, and, just going to be bashed in. We have all been talking about education equity for students of color, and it's gonna make inroads. It's just gonna and it has to. And I think the more we consistently do it, the more we talk about Black educators, Black school founders, these people who are boots on the ground, who have more face-to-face time with all of the people we talk about, the lives we talk about changing, that's when things are going to start happening. So yeah.
I think that's one of the real powerful things about your campaign, about your effort, is that, number one, if people go to your website, there's a toolkit. So you're helping to arm people with something to be able to go out and do something, right? And the toolkit right now, I think, mostly helps people with spreading the word and in social media, create a presence. So I think that's really great. Your website also offers, which you've mentioned here today, kind of a directory of Black-owned schools that are providing opportunity for folks. That's super important, because if people have never seen it, then they don't know it, right? Like, so they have to be able to see it. And honestly, when you talk about school choice, I swear that people's mind almost immediately goes to white, strict private schools that don't teach people of color very well, or don't treat them well, or whatnot. That's where their mind goes. It never goes to the Black private school by a Black private school leader who could serve more kids if those kids could afford to actually go to that culturally affirming private school environment.
That's right.
So I think it's amazing that you have listed them. You have a directory of them. The other thing is this, and I should put this up here. You guys have this directory of what do you call, like, the people who are like like the trailblazers or something like that. Let me see.
Shakers.
Is it movers and shakers? I'm going to give you a hard time about this one. Let's see here. So if we're at your site, we go down, movers and shakers. There it is. Now, I love this number one. First of all, Walter Blanks is an all-star, a hero. So I love that you and him are leading efforts that make the rest of us allow some of the rest of us to have a break. But I know all these people, Kevin Chavis and Durrell. I don't know Paul, but you have these folks on here who have been fighting for a long time, who represent our community, who are taking a stand, and they're not taking no for an answer. And then you get to this one dude here. Okay, see, did y'all ask me for a picture? Because this picture,
I emailed y'all and I said, hey, this is what's about to happen.
Why I look like I work in data control center? Like, why a picture of me? All these great pictures on here, and this looks like Chris from accounting. This is your State Farm representative right here. I'm gonna send y'all a different picture.
You look quite handsome. Your picture is amazing.
I'm gonna send y'all a different picture, because you got a brother looking like he's selling insurance. It's Jake from State Farm.
Oh, you want the hoodie and the fuller the
I should do a hoodie. I'm joking. I'm happy to be part of a group that I think is in our own way doing the same work, but we don't always work together. We don't always see each other. We're not always in the same room. So your effort actually, I think, could become a meeting point for a lot of people that do work in the world, but should actually be collaborating more.
Yeah. And y'all were just, I mean, when I wrote the op-ed, we're like, okay, I was like, getting the practitioners, the people who are already doing this, to talk about Black minds. And y'all were just so gracious. So all of those people on the Movers and Shakers page were the first ones who when I reached out, agreed to do a podcast and a video to promote the furtherance of the initiative Black Minds Matter. So I definitely thank y'all, because without y'all, I tell everybody to go back and listen and watch. It was just amazing, just the conversations that we were able to have. And that episode that you and Walter did, we titled it Black Mind in a White School. And that was a conversation starter for the Black-owned schools directory. I don't know if you knew this, Chris, because while you and Walter and Darrell and one of our fellows, Nani, were talking about how most of the time you have Black students who are going to predominantly white schools, and how that was Walter's experience and Darrell's experience and Nanya's experience, and how, the cultural affirmations and all the extra stuff wasn't necessarily there for them. And I was thinking, like, that wasn't my experience. I went to an all Black private school. My school was founded by my pastor, who she was a woman and she was Black, the church school. And I thought that was how, the majority of schools were coming up until that episode with you and Walter. And so I was like, let's go a little bit deeper. And James Foreman Jr. read a lot of his pieces about the history of school choice and how these independent Black run schools during the segregation era, and then the Freedoms Bureau converting these independent run Black schools into public schools. And, it got me to think, well, how many Black owned schools are out there? And you do a lot of this work. And I was listening to one of your episodes on 8 Black Hands, when you highlighted a guy who's about to start a school. So I can't wait to get his name on there on the directory. But yeah,
Rashad, we should say it's Rashad Turner in the Twin Cities.
Yeah. What's the name of his school? Let me write this.
He hasn't started the school yet, so he's in the process of pulling it together now. So he's in the planning process. Rashad is the president of the Minnesota Parents Union.
Yeah.
He also was the leader of Black Lives Matter St. Paul, and has been an amazing, no nonsense advocate for school choice and for Black education, period.
Yeah.
He's been an amazing resource. You just mentioned something that I can't let go by. I want people to see this. So you just talked about James Foreman Jr.
Yeah, that's
and it. For people who don't know James, he's got a great paper called The Secret History of School Choice: How Progressives Got There First. And this is a great paper I read a while back that kind of changed my frame a little bit, because we're always talking about school choice as if it's some sort of right-wing plot to destroy, the great, amazing district schools. And that's too simple of a story.
Yeah.
So if we ever find people that tell too simple of a story, they're going to have to add things like the Black Panthers started schools alongside their breakfast programs and their free healthcare programs and whatnot. And the reason that they did that was because that they determined if a community was going to take complete control over their lives, one of the things they had to take control over was the intellectual development of their children, and that they couldn't leave that to the same system that was harming them in the streets with police officers, in the courts with judges, and just in general in a society that wasn't structured to help them be their best. So it wasn't like some right-wing plot. These weren't like lab-created Negroes in some philanthropy camp that were turned out. No, that's not what this is about. And I love that James had a scholarly kind of take on helping you understand that there's more to the story than that. Now, I just want to say everything I just said. That's not Denisha talking, just in case y'all. So only come for Chris on these things, because I'm willing to just put it out there.
No, that's completely right. And so when you think about Pitt schools, and Gerard Robinson, one of the he did a very deep dive into like the history of school choice and Pitt schools, where African slaves were still educating themselves in what we in pits, stealing materials, pencils, and crafting their own books and stuff to educate themselves and to learn. And so that's pre-segregation, any formation of public school. And yes, when in 1635, around that time when white boys in this country had the opportunity to get a free public education, Black people were still running independent schools, and this was this wasn't a part of public dollars. And so, that history that he outlined in his piece is just, I thank you for pulling up, because it's definitely something that everyone should be aware of and mindful of. And even in today's society, when we talk about school choice and when we talk about education freedom, it's some of these schools and states are not receiving public dollars, and they want it that way. They're kind of like homeschoolers. where we're like, we don't want any government interference
Right.
to run and operate our own schools, and that's totally fine. And so with the directory, it's like these schools are out there.
Mm-hmm.
They've
Mm-hmm.
existed before 2021. They've existed long before then. And so highlighting the history and encouraging more people to open schools and to run schools. Like in Sharif's work, I saw somebody to be a Black educator. It's more than just the here and now. We got to appreciate our history, and it's really deep. It's really deep.
I'm glad you mentioned the history part. I'm going to just put this up real quick. We Are an African People is a book that I think we should use scholarship to deepen the conversation so that we get out of having like simple stories told about what school choice is and who it's for and who benefits. African Americans, there was a period of time where independent schooling was a big part of the African American political cause. And we had hundreds and hundreds of independent schools that were developing traditions and pedagogy and ways of teaching our students when the system failed us. They were little safe havens, but they weren't always well resourced and well funded in the way they could be if we had a decidedly pro-choice education policy in every state. Right. Like there was a way for them to actually. So right now, charter schools became somewhat of a way for people to start schools, but it still comes with a lot of strings that not everybody wants to do. The Black independent schools and the movement that started them had a lot of freedom to teach in the ways that they knew best suited the kids in their communities. And she get back to that.
Yeah. And I think that, there's this wave of micro schools that's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And in Florida, there's one that's going to be opening up pretty soon. I'll put the spices out there for, definitely go highlight it when it, opens up. But out of the Urban League, Orlando, they're opening up a micro school. And I think that is amazing. In the Black Mothers Forum in Arizona, which is an organization, I think it's telling that organizations are starting schools. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so the Black Mothers Forum, they have, I think, 2, and their plan is to have 58 by the fall. Micro schools. And these are the one-room schoolhouses, these little independent schools that used to be, and they're coming back up again. And that's going to be some major, you talk about politics and all this stuff, that's going to be some major pressure on people refuting education freedom, the NAACP versus the Black Mothers Forum, and we both care about the bodies and the minds of Black students. And then when you weigh those of like, well, you say no to charters, but I'm running schools, and so it's gonna be remarkable. And there's one opening up pretty soon in Orlando of the Central Florida Urban League opening micro schools, and their plan is to have them all across the Orlando area and then spill over into the other urban leagues across the state. And that's remarkable.
That's amazing. I have to say, the micro schools thing, I have a friend, a good friend, who starts micro schools and supports them. And it wasn't something that I thought about for a long time. Years ago, the EPA put out a report that basically said that small schools and what they called smart growth schools were the way to grow very organically grown schools that prosper over time instead of building these large schools. And in there was this little piece that I never forgot. And it was just talking about research on different aspects of schools. And it specifically said that children of color, and specifically Black children, do better in smaller schools, right, than they do in these kind of large, massive Columbine type schools.
Yes,
and actually, white kids do quite well in the Columbine size schools. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? Yeah. So like, so we consolidated schools over like 50 years, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And they got more depersonalized. The people who really fared the worst in that were Black students. Like that, it really wasn't good. Big depersonalized schools weren't best for us, smaller schools.
Yeah.
And that made me think, oh, okay, I get now why parents intuitively, when they find a small school, like a charter school, for instance, why there's a wait list. They come in, they see that things look a little more under control and a little less institutional and huge. And, so this micro school things I think is amazing. The Urban League doing it. Your Central Florida Urban League has been on the front line of a lot of education things for years.
Yeah.
They've been like kind of a vanguard. I want to make note of this one thing that you mentioned. You said the NAACP versus the mothers, right? And I want to call this out just because here's a couple of things. Number one, I remember being at the national convention for the NAACP and being in one of the breakout sessions held by the NEA and the AFT. And they mentioned that NEA teachers have their have their NAACP dues taken directly out of their check as part of their union dues, right? And it hit me. I was like, wow, y'all that close together, and it turns out that's how the NAACP was getting a good percentage of its membership was directly from teachers that get an auto draw through their union. I thought, oh, okay, so now you can't be independent on these issues at all.
I say that those saying that Black Lives Matter and simultaneously don't say that Black minds matter, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. And so I kind of have to make my way up to that, because people coming in and I say, those saying that Black Lives Matter and don't simultaneously say that Black lives matter, that's wrong. They don't really understand, but it's that building up to that, saying that. Because if the NAACP is getting money directly out of the teachers unions pockets and they're saying that Black minds don't matter, but they are saying, oh yeah, don't kill us, but kill us while we're in school. Like, please just go ahead. That's wrong. And it's hypocritical. It makes no sense.
Well, and they got heat for everybody, except for teachers. And this is the thing, like teachers are a very sympathetic group of people in the United States. It's hard to say anything critical about them because everybody's feelings get hurt, even when you're doing it on behalf of children who are vulnerable and are not receiving the full benefit of the educational system that they're in. And you still can't offer a critique of their teachers because it gets lost up in all these kind of like white tears and all these like fragile like positions and whatnot. And oh my God, you're bashing teachers or whatnot. And we don't say any of that when we talk about police officers. We don't say any of that. We say that our bodies are being brutalized.
True.
We're being over policed. Yeah. And oftentimes the police officers in our communities are like hopped up 22 and 23 years old who are, puffed up and coming into our communities and don't have a firm attachment to it. So they're treating us differently. Yeah. And just in the last week, we had a teacher in Little Rock, Arkansas, who made a 5-year-old kindergartner pull poop out of a toilet to teach him a lesson on using too much toilet paper. That was just this week. Then the same week, same couple of weeks that we had a teacher that was using slavery yoga as a lesson on Black history. Teacher who intervened on a fight between a Black girl and a white girl, but only intervened after the white girl had completely beaten up a Muslim girl and let it just go by. Like just it's case after case after case where we have a case study. We should be able to say, listen, I don't care about your feelings. Our kids are actually not doing well in your schools. Yeah. And it's forget the school to prison pipeline. This is just the school prison nexus. It's not even like there's a two. There's not like a space between the two. These are starter prisons. Many of these schools are starter prisons, and you're teaching kids how to be obedient prisoners from day one, rather than teaching them how to be free citizens in a country that has lots of opportunity. That's my little soapbox item of this. But one thing I wanted to add to the Urban League thing is many of our critics like to say, I stand with the NAACP, and that becomes their license to say, you as a Black person, here's my license to disregard what you're saying. I have an NAACP license to disregard. This is what I want to say to people. There are 3 major Black organizations in the United States that focus on education. There are many more than that. But the largest educational organization around Black education is the UNCF. And they are not anti-choice, anti-charter, anti-Black schools. As a matter of fact, the schools that they represent are private schools. They are called HBCUs, which are private Black schools, historically Black colleges and universities. That is the world's largest Black educational organization. You can't talk about us without bringing them into the case study, right? And they are for the things we're talking about. The second largest is the Urban League. And you can't keep grabbing on to the NAACP and not talking about things like you mentioned, Central Florida Urban League wanting to start a school. I can match that by saying the Urban League of Madison, Wisconsin tried to start a school and got beat up by the teachers union. There's urban leagues in Ohio that have tried to start schools. They are also not anti-choice for Black students. So what I'm going to need is my good white friends who are progressive and liberal, and even some of my good Black friends who want to be white and progressive. What I'm going to need to say to you is I'm going to need y'all to stop talking about the NAACP as if they're your license to disregard what all of the rest of us want. Yeah. They're not the last word on Black education or Black views on education. And you certainly can't do it when you're bypassing two of the largest Black organizations that have something to say about education. Soapbox time. So what do you think, Denisha? You with me?
I'm with you. No, and it's totally true. You know, you and I thank you. I'm gonna put those. I'm still in that and put that into my personal soapbox. Because it's true. You know, you think about organizations who support the Black mind, who support education freedom, who support equity in education. You have these outliers who are just protecting the status quo, and you know it does when you're talking to the general public. And they say, oh, well, the NAACP doesn't support this. Their first reaction is it must be something wrong. You know, it must be something wrong with why the NAACP doesn't support education freedom. When their main talking point is, oh, you know, we don't support it because public schools have been the backbone of the Black, you know, the Black experience in this country. They provided jobs for Black teachers and they desegregated for us, you know, to be able to come to these schools. And it's like, well, back to those stats. How has that been going? You know, students are still graduating and not knowing how to read. They're not able to do math. If they do graduate, they're not reading on level. They're not doing math on level. And the ones that don't graduate, they're just directly emptied out into the prison system, into the criminal justice system. And so, and it's like, what do you want to spend money on? You know, the average per pupil expenditure is nationwide 14,000 for inmates. That's 50K. So it's like, what do we want to spend these monies on? And
whose money is it? That's the part that, like, I'm always tripped out. Like, I have 3 kids.
A lot of money out of my taxes. It's our money. I will let you.
And my taxes aren't insignificant. I just want to be real about this, right? So my taxes are a little bit of something. But I have multiple kids. You're raising money on my kids, and I don't have any say on where it goes or how it's used. Your question that you just asked, how's it going? I love that question. I love to ask people, how are the children? Yeah. When people start talking about these schools are the cornerstone of our democracy.
Yeah.
They've been the really, have they been all that?
Right.
Like, really?
Like you're going to tell me like, oh, I would love to send my, you know, I'm not going to, the average person, I mean, in my community, you ask them, would you rather send your kid to this district school? And it's not, you know, we pick on the district school because yes, we've held them to a standard. They're getting free money every year from the state, from the federal government to educate our kids. So yes, I'm going to hold them to a higher standard. Yeah. Like I'm not picking on them just because like you are getting buttloads of money to educate kids and you haven't been doing it. So yeah, you are going to get picked on. You know, it's not public versus private. When we say that, just like you were saying about the teacher thing, to not, you know, step on anybody's toes and not make anybody feel bad. But it is a conversation. If you ask anyone in my neighborhood, would you rather send your kid to R.L. Brown, and I'll call names because that's the school I failed twice from. So would you rather send your kid to R.L. Brown or to a private school? They're going to pick the private school. They wouldn't want their kid to just go to that school because it was bad when they went there. It was bad now that their kids are going there. It was probably bad when their grandparents are going there. It's just not, it's not a school that's pumping out high quality educated Black kids, and if you ask those parents, and we have surveys, national surveys, 65% say, yes, I would rather send my kid to a different school. Nationwide, parents are saying this. And so we have to listen to them. And, it's during one of the beautiful things I would say about this time of cancel culture, it just never ends. But one of the beautiful things is people aren't taking things at face value anymore. Just because you say you're doing one thing, just because you put out a statement and say this and you say that, that's not what we're going to just believe at face value. And that's now become a part of. And so I'm hoping that same energy that you're doing for all this stuff will come into the education space, because we need a lot of cancel culture in the education space. A lot of
I love that. That is so, listen, I'm with you. You start that movement. Like I'm all about cancel culture if it's used the right way. I'll just be very honest with you.
Yeah, it's been much, but I think that same energy needs to be like, even if we just got a sprinkle of it, just like.
Yeah. Well, I want to cancel an inequitable system that doesn't care when non-white children fail, but does care when white children fail. I want to cancel a system that puts the least prepared teachers in classrooms where kids need the most or need the best prepared. I want to cancel a situation where tax bases create the funding that schools get, and it creates really unequal opportunities. I want to cancel a system that tells parents that each of your children is going to be worth $12,000 to $15,000 a year, but you can have no say on how that money is spent on behalf of your kids. I want to cancel a situation where fancy people say that they're all for public education, but that really means that they're putting their kids into these little harbors, safe harbors of like privilege, because they have a good mortgage, or they know how to move, they know how to use Zillow, and then they don't want anybody who's left in the education deserts to have an opportunity. So I want to cancel that. Listen, I know it's really important to cancel Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben, Dr. Seuss, Mr. Potato Head. Those are like, was that? You're not? I think it's really important. Mr. Potato Head, that's like the most important issue of our time. Really, I honestly think like Mr. Potato Head is offensive, like more offensive than turning out generation after generation after generation that can't read and can't write and can't compute and can't compete in a very ruthless American economy that requires people
like how many Mr. Potato Heads can read, how many Black I would believe the same. Maybe we found that like the number of Mr. Potato Heads that were mass produced and the number of students who are mass produced by the public education system who can't read, probably the same.
But don't you think that like Aunt Jemima is a problem, and Uncle Ben, and eventually we got to get to the wild oats guy, right? Like, like the oats guy, that's messed up, anyways, I'm joking, except for I do think that people on both sides of the aisle, the right and the left, are superfluous in what they're focusing on right now. They're focusing on some stuff that doesn't matter, that's not germane to our lives right now. And we can't be that way. So that's why I love what you're doing. Focus us on what matters. Black minds matter. Make sure that we're focused on that, and keep putting the stats out there for people to see and have to deal with. I'll give you the final word, Denisha Merriwether, as we come to the end of our discussion here. What is it that you want to leave people with, and what resources do you have for them?
Yeah, well, I want to just thank you, Chris, for allowing me on your platform and to share Black Minds Matter with your audience, because I truly appreciate it. It's truly something that I'm deeply passionate about. And your enterprise is one of the killers out there. You're just doing some amazing work. So first of all, I want to just thank you. And then lastly, I'll tell people, follow the website, blackmindsmatter.net, find out a lot of resources and stuff to come there. I'll give you a teaser, in the development process of trying to get a book, choosing the right school for your Black child. And so it's going to be great. This is just a movement to come, and it's just going to be fantastic. So follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, blackmindsmatter.net, and just stay in tune.
I love it. Thank you for coming on this morning. I appreciate your time and for you sticking with us, and even through some of my soapbox moments, but I'm going to have them every day. I'm going to have them. So you were just here for it today. For people listening and watching, this has been an hour with Denisha Merriwether. She is the Director of Family Engagement with the American Federation of Children. She also leads an effort called Black Lives Matter. Black Minds, Matter, which you can find at blackmindsmatter.net. If you go there, you will find a directory of Black schools, which is important for your knowledge, for you to know where the schools are and what's important about what we're trying to build here. You will also find a social media toolkit that can help you spread the word. So I encourage you to help us spread the word and get more people interested. And you can also find there a directory of individuals who are considered to be change makers or trailblazers, but I would see it more as people that are building a network. You can connect with all of us, and stop just filling your panels up with people that are going to say the same tired things over and over again, and start mixing your panels up a little bit with some people that are going to bring some fire and a little bit of cayenne pepper to your panel. So I would appreciate that. Denisha, thank you so much. You are a true all-star. You make me happier about the future, and I think that you're just doing great work. So thank you.
Thank you.